Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the dust of time, into a place where the sun beats down on mud brick temples and the scent of warm barley porridge lingers in the air. You're in Ur, one of the great cities of ancient Sumer, sometime around 3200 BCE. You open your eyes slowly, and there it is. The ziggurat casting a long shadow across the plain, the Euphrates murmuring nearby, and a cluster of goats stubbornly refusing to be herded. Someone nudges you, a scribe, young, sleep-deprived, smudged with clay. He's got a tablet in one hand, a stylus in the other, and an air of someone who's very tired of counting jars of beer. You blink, confused. He hands you a damp scrap of clay covered in wedge marks and says something that roughly translates to, "Don't mess this up." So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are and where are you watching from? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing barefoot in the middle of a temple courtyard, wondering how the morning turned into an unpaid internship in one of the most chaotic offices in history. Around you, dozens of scribes are kneeling over clay, pressing tiny triangles into the surface with their styluses, long, pointed reeds that double as writing tools, and, if necessary, back scratchers. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, goat sweat, and the faint aroma of fish stew someone reheated over a charcoal pit. And yes, there's a goat watching you. Again. Your assignment is simple. Help document grain deliveries for the high priest's kitchen. Simple, except you've just learned that the Sumerians didn't exactly write in the way we think of it. Their cuneiform script, composed of wedge-shaped impressions, isn't just for storytelling. It's for lists. Endless, glorious lists. Barley, fish, reeds, bread, more barley. Historians still argue whether this form of writing emerged purely from economic need, or whether there was also a sacred aspect. Was the receipt born from trade, or was it a love letter to the gods disguised as logistics? You ponder this as a man drops a basket of onions at your feet and demands a receipt. You're handed a fresh tablet, still damp from the clay pit, and your stylus. It's awkward at first. Your triangles are wobbly, your spacing questionable, and your first attempt ends in a splotch that looks like a drunk hedgehog. But eventually, with some help, you manage a half-decent string of wedges, a unit of onions, a symbol for the god Nana, since this batch is temple-bound, a mark indicating they arrived intact. No nibble marks, no bitey goats. And just like that, you've created a receipt. But here's the funny thing. No one gives you a copy. The receipt stays with the temple. If the onion guy wants proof, too bad. He'll just have to remember your face and hope you don't wander off into the barley fields. The temple's record room is nearby, a cave-like structure with shelving made of mud brick cubbies. Hundreds, maybe thousands of tablets sit in neat rows, each tagged with a date, a scribe's seal, and a vague sense of disapproval. You peek inside and find one tablet inscribed not with grain tallies, but a record of fish delivered one day late, slightly smelly. You wonder who documented that, and whether they did it with a smug grin. As the sun creeps higher, the city begins to hum. Potters shout across alleys, Merchants haggle over copper weights. Children run barefoot, playing a game that involves throwing pebbles at donkeys. You don't ask questions. Back in the courtyard, a priest saunters by, robes trailing dramatically, and murmurs something to a senior scribe. The scribe sighs and hands you another tablet. This one's for goat milk, which is being delivered in a bag, which is leaking. You are expected to document that too. Later, as you take a short break under a fig tree, you overhear two scribes arguing about the correct notation for slightly cracked pot. Apparently, there's a difference between cracked due to bad firing and cracked by angry wife. The fact that they have symbols for both fills you with a sleepy kind of admiration. And somewhere between the bleating of donkeys and the distant rhythm of drums, it dawns on you. You are living in the first civilization where bureaucracy actually works, more or less. It's slow, it's clay-based, but it works. For now, you settle into the rhythm of it. Clay, wedge, clay, wedge. Someone spills date syrup. Another scribe falls asleep mid-column. The priest wants a tally of his spices, including the really good cinnamon. You do your best. By sundown, your hands are covered in dried clay, your tunic is stained with who knows what, and you've completed your first day as an apprentice receipt writer in the ancient world. Congratulations. You're officially part of the world's oldest known paperwork. The next morning greets you with the aggressive squawking of domesticated geese and the unmistakable thump of someone dropping a sack of lentils just outside your sleeping mat. There's no time to stretch. The sun has barely risen, but the temple courtyard is already filling with scribes, traders, farmers, and that one man who always insists his receipt should include extra space for presentation flair. You wipe yesterday's dried clay from your hands and join the procession toward the records platform, a shaded area where scribes hunch over workstations that look suspiciously like upside-down crates. Your supervisor, an elderly man named Gidu with 6 teeth and infinite patience, is already there. He doesn't look up when he hands you today's assignment, grain ledgers, which sounds majestic until you realize it's just counting sacks. Lots of them. This is where you first start to appreciate the sheer scale of Sumerian paperwork. See, it's not that the Sumerians liked writing for fun. No, they were the original overthinkers. They invented writing mostly so they could track their stuff. How much grain came in, how much left, what type, from whom, and whether it was clean, mixed, fermented, or possibly infested with beetles. Symbol, wavy triangle with 2 dots, unofficially known as uh-oh grain. You squat beside a mountain of grain sacks, each waiting for its moment of bureaucratic fame. One by one, workers dump them open. You sniff, prod, squint, and occasionally sneeze, because ancient grain dust is no joke. Each sack gets a tally. Some are split across temple functions, bakery, brewing, and sacrifices. Others go to rations for workers, who, fun fact, get paid almost entirely in barley and beer. Historians still argue whether this setup made Sumerians technically employees, or just very well-fed volunteers. You consider this deeply as you press the stylus into a fresh clay tablet, and note that this sack contains exactly 32 liters of barley, good quality, no visible beetles. Next to you, a younger scribe is carefully adding decorative flourishes to his wedge strokes. Makes the gods happier, he whispers, dead serious. You nod politely, though you suspect the gods mostly care that the numbers add up. A man with a crooked back and impressive eyebrows approaches, hauling a sack that smells complicated. You poke your stylus into the top and find some grain sprouting. Early fermentation, he says hopefully. Very trendy. You write slightly damp partial sprouting, which in receipt terms is the equivalent of a polite side-eye. Eventually, Gidu beckons you toward the temple storeroom. It's where the real magic happens, or at least where the magic is stored, weighed, documented, sniffed again, and shelved. You step through a thick curtain of woven reeds into a cool, shadowy chamber filled with amphorae, baskets, bundles of reeds, and a surprising number of cats. One cat is sleeping on a receipt tablet from last week. You lift it gently and discover it documents 3 goats, 1 with a limp, 2 with opinions. You're not sure if that was literal or poetic, but you copy the format for your next entry anyway. As you begin documenting the items being moved in and out, a pattern emerges. Every transfer, every dried fig, bronze tool, or length of dyed linen has its own notation. There are even special symbols to denote if something is fragile or if the last delivery had issues. One mark, a sort of sideways zigzag, means check next time for possible miscounts. You resolve to use it liberally. Then comes the best part of the morning, the beer inventory. Temple beer is not like modern beer. It's thick, soupy, and consumed with a straw, often communally. You observe 2 temple brewers pour a viscous jug of it into a large jar, while a third man waves his arms and shouts, "More foam! It counts!" The scribes record it all. You do your part by noting volume, smell, yeasty, not terrible, and clarity, questionable. Then you press a seal into the clay to confirm the delivery. That's when you realize receipts aren't just for goods, they're for people. Temple workers, priests, brewers, even musicians, all have their rations tallied, their hours noted, their tools signed in and out. You pass one woman arguing with a clerk over the number of fish she was promised for her lute performance. She gestures dramatically at her clay token. "It says 3 fish, she insists. 1 was a baby. The clerk shrugs and scribes a tiny fish next to a big one. You record the adjustment in your own copy, wondering if this qualifies as a performance review. By midday, you're sticky with sweat, inked in dust, and only halfway through your slate. A local merchant arrives with a cart full of rush mats and insists that each be counted individually, even the torn ones. You comply, then record 17 mats, 2 frayed, 1 possibly haunted, squeaked during inspection. And just when you think you might actually be getting good at this, a priest hands you a tablet and says, "Double it. This is the copy." Because that's the other fun part. Sumerians made backup receipts. You sigh, sit down on the steps, and start re-etching every single mark, line by line. There's no Ctrl+C here. Just patience, clay, and an aching lower back. Still, you're beginning to understand the beauty of it. Every receipt is a snapshot of daily life. Who brought what? Who owed what? Who got credit and who got suspicious glances? And somehow these little slabs of mud are the bones of civilization. You trace a wedge with your fingertip, feel the ridge where someone else, 3,000 years ago, pressed theirs. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they had a long day too. But they did their job, wrote it down, preserved it, gave us something to whisper about in the dark, long after the barley's been baked into bread and the goats are gone. The temple storeroom echoes with the sound of grain scooping, jar clinking, and the soft thud of clay tablets being stacked, sometimes gently, sometimes not. You're cross-legged now, nibbling on a date, watching two scribes bicker about the correct symbol for beer of medium frothiness. One of them insists on adding an extra wedge to show pleasant aftertaste. The other mutters something about inflated beer reviews. Today's assignment is different. You've been granted access to the back storage chamber, a half-lit cave of terracotta jars and tightly bound reed scrolls. Not scrolls with ink, mind you. Scrolls with string. Bundles of receipts tied together by topic, or so you're told. This is where the bureaucratic beast truly lives. You walk the aisle like a tiny archaeologist in your own time. Each shelf houses decades of temple records, deliveries from long-dead farmers, tax counts from flood years. Even one rather odd collection of tablets labeled only rat incidents. You make a mental note to come back to that. Then Guido, bless him, decides you're ready for a real test. Inventorying the beer storage. You are not ready. Inside, it's cool, dark, and smells like slightly sour bread dough mixed with something metallic. Giant amphorae line the walls, most sealed with clay stoppers impressed with seals. Tiny images of gods, priests, and the occasional bored-looking lion. Each jar holds a specific batch. You approach one labeled for communal festivals, do not sample, and give it a sniff anyway. Spicy, yeasty, dangerously inviting. Sumerian beer, as it turns out, was closer to porridge than Pilsner, made from fermented barley bread soaked in water and left to do its thing under the sun. It was thick, opaque, and so rich that drinking it without a straw was like trying to sip oatmeal through a flute. Also, it spoiled fast, hence the constant monitoring. Your job is to match the amphora seals with their corresponding tablets. Each delivery must be confirmed by cross-referencing the seal impression on the jar with the tablet listing the amount, date, and supplier. If you're wondering whether this seems excessive for a beverage you literally have to chew, yes, it is. But then you remember, this isn't just beer. It's wages. It's offerings. It's social glue. People get married over this stuff. Workers strike if it's watered down. Gods are gifted the good batches. And yes, historians still argue whether beer rations were more symbolic or genuinely enjoyable. You vote for enjoyable, even if it tastes like sour gravy. As you study a particularly crumbly tablet with the entry, 5 amphorae, strong head, smells divine, something odd catches your eye. A small, neatly pressed symbol shaped like a duck's foot. You point it out to Guido. He squints and mutters, "Ah, yes, the brewer's personal flourish. He thought it was lucky." You pause. The Sumerians had brand logos. It hits you like a cart of lentils. Receipts weren't just records, they were reputations. If your goat deliveries were consistently excellent, your seal carried weight. If you skimped on your fish portions, your name got noted. Some seals were literal mini-scenes. One merchant used a carving of himself shaking hands with a priest. Another had a dancing turtle. You're told it meant quick and joyful service, which is debatable. One tablet even has a crude drawing of two goats standing on each other's backs. You ask? Gidu sighs. He said it meant high quality. I said it meant goat pyramid. You both agree it's charmingly ambiguous. You leave the beer room a little wobbly. Not from drinking, of course, but from the sheer volume of cross-checking. Back in the courtyard, another lesson awaits. You're introduced to the concept of ration tokens, small clay cones, balls, and discs, representing specific quantities of goods. Before writing evolved into full-blown cuneiform, these tokens were how Sumerians recorded trades. A ball meant a measure of grain. A cone meant a day's beer. Keep enough of them and you basically had a punch card system for food. Eventually, someone got tired of carrying a pocket full of spheres and thought, what if we just drew pictures of these on clay? And thus, receipts were born. You try using a ration token system for today's fish count. It goes poorly. The fish arrive in a basket that was probably woven in a rush. Half the delivery is flopping with suspicious urgency. The other half is clearly past its prime. You squint. There's a symbol for fresh. There's a symbol for questionable. You end up carving C scribe for clarification. Later, the high priest himself walks past you. His robe is embroidered, his beard combed into symmetrical coils. He nods at your tablet. Precise wedges, he says. You beam. A compliment. From the man whose sandals probably cost more than your family goat. Encouraged, you return to the tablets. You find yourself starting to recognize patterns. Which merchants short their barley sacks? Which brewers add fig juice? Which seals mean trustworthy? And which mean approach with caution and maybe backup? In the evening, under a purple-gold sky, you sit beside the reed-lined canal with your stylus resting across your lap. The day is done. The temple stores are full. The records updated. Another quiet day of counting, carving, and sipping fishy-smelling air. But before you sleep, Gidu hands you one final tablet. It's blank. He winks. Tomorrow, you write the first line. And somehow, in this slow, grain-filled, goat-adjacent civilization, you're beginning to feel oddly at home. You're up before the roosters today, which, given how loud they were yesterday, feels like sweet revenge. The city of is wrapped in that cool pre-dawn haze, the kind that makes everything seem softer, like someone put a sheer linen veil over the world. You stretch, yawn, and grab your stylus. Time to get back to your second favorite activity after sleeping, scratching triangles into mud. Today's lesson is a real treat. Learning how to write cuneiform, or, more accurately, learning how not to ruin a perfectly decent tablet. Gidu greets you with a grunt and a lump of damp clay the size of a generous melon. Try not to smear, he says helpfully. You're directed to the writing bench, a plank of wood propped on amphorae, already covered in a fine mist of dried clay flakes. Around you, other scribes are practicing their wedges with the fierce determination of students who know mistakes get you assigned to fish inventory. You press your stylus into the soft clay. Not too hard, not too shallow. Left to right? No. Top to bottom? Also no. You soon discover that Sumerian writing is less of a direction and more of a suggestion. Lines go in multiple directions, sometimes even wrapping around. It's basically the IKEA instruction manual of writing systems. Your first attempt looks like a bird tap-danced across the tablet. Your second attempt resembles a hedgehog having a bad day. Guido peers over your shoulder and murmurs, "That says 3 angry cows, unless you meant that." You didn't. But slowly, you get the hang of it. You learn to control the pressure, to smooth over mistakes with a thumb swipe, to make each wedge neat and confident. The stylus becomes an extension of your hand. The clay, a mirror of your mood, which today, fortunately, is slightly better than 3 angry cows. Cuneiform isn't an alphabet. It's not even quite a script in the way you're used to. It's a collection of logograms, symbols representing whole words or concepts. One wedge might mean barley, but add a tail and suddenly it's spoiled barley. Place it near a triangle and now it's barley delivered late, possibly due to rain or goats. It's nuanced, fiddly, and utterly addictive. Historians still argue whether scribes had a formal education system or simply learned by messing up enough times that someone took pity on them. Given Guido's teaching style, equal parts patience and sarcasm, you suspect it's the latter. Mid-morning brings a new challenge: the transaction tablet. Unlike simple tally tablets, these are written with an audience in mind. They might be shown to priests, merchants, or occasionally, a very confused goat owner trying to dispute a hay count. They require precision, grammar, and flair, and you're given one to copy. 12 jars of beer delivered by Lukal to the temple of Inanna, inspected by High Brewer Gouda, sealed with the mark of the dancing lion. It's a masterpiece of brevity and accountability. You write it once, then again. The second time is better. Guido nods. "Still looks like the lion's limping," he says, "but it's a compliment." At noon, you visit the clay pit. It's a simple setup. A large basin filled with earth, water, and one grumpy man named Huzur, who mixes it all with a stick and muttered curses. He gives you a fresh lump of clay and a half smile. "Soft today. Good luck." You thank him like he just gave you a warm pastry. Back at the bench, you notice the other scribes comparing seal impressions. Not just the images, but how deep, how clean, how centered they are. It's a kind of ancient flex. You realize, for the Sumerian scribe, beauty and bureaucracy go hand in hand. A well-crafted receipt isn't just proof of exchange, it's a mark of pride. You're also introduced to error notation. There's a symbol, kind of like a crooked triangle with a dot, that means this line is suspect. Scribes used it when they weren't sure about a number or name, or if the original info came from a source of questionable sobriety. You mentally label it the A mark. You try it out on a tablet documenting a trade of fish for sandal repairs. The fish count seems optimistic. You add the mark. Guido nods in approval. Good instincts. No one catches 60 fish before breakfast unless they're Poseidon. Later, you're pulled into a group exercise, copying royal edicts from the temple archives. These are the big ones: the receipts of power, decrees about land, water, labor, and marriage rights. One decree announces that the barley rations shall be doubled for workers during the flood season. Another revokes a merchant's trading rights after repeated complaints of bad figs. You realize these documents, in their quiet way, shape people's lives. A well-placed wedge could mean more food. A miswritten name could cost someone their land. It's heavy stuff, disguised as administrative drudgery. As the sun dips low, you find yourself back at your tablet, practicing signatures, or rather, seals. Every scribe has one, a carved cylinder rolled across the clay to leave a unique impression. Yours is still being carved, but for now, you borrow a generic temple seal, two men shaking hands beneath a star. You practice rolling it just right, steady pressure, clean line, no smudges. It's oddly satisfying, like stamping your identity into time. Just before sunset, you sit beside Gidu under a fig tree. He watches you silently for a while, then says, "You're improving, still slow, but better." You smile. Coming from him, that's high praise. As twilight settles, you gaze at your stack of tablets. Today's work. Proof of transactions, trades, promises made and kept. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And it matters. Because one day, someone will dig these up, will run their fingers over your wedges, will wonder what kind of person carved them, whether they were tired, whether they liked dates, whether they were proud. And tonight, as the stars flicker into being above Ur, you're proud. The smell of damp reeds and drying clay is practically your cologne now. By this point, you don't even flinch when a goat nibbles your tablet. That's just life in the temple courtyard. Today, though, Gidu has something special for you. A peek into the personal lives of your fellow scribes. You're ushered into a quieter annex of the records office, a chamber where the walls are lined not with beer tallies or ox exchanges, but documents about people, and not the glamorous kind. These are the reports of barley miscounts, loan disputes, and arguments over how many baskets of onions someone's sister really delivered. The scribes call this place the goat shed, because the clay here is often full of drama and nonsense, and occasionally, literal goats. You find yourself intrigued. This is the juicy center of Sumerian record-keeping, interpersonal bureaucracy. You begin your morning sorting through complaint tablets. One starts simply enough. 4 bushels of barley owed. But the next line adds, Scribe Kitty failed to record the second delivery. He was distracted by singing girls. You look at Gidu. He shrugs. It happens. Another tablet reads, One sheep was not properly weighed. Also, it bit me. You admire the dedication to detail. Your task is to copy one of these petty but crucial exchanges into a fresh tablet, ensuring legibility and neutrality. These are official records, after all. Bias will not be tolerated, even if the tablet clearly implies the sheep had it coming. One particular tablet catches your attention. It involves a woman named Anatum, who delivered 2 baskets of figs to a brewer named Ibi Sin. He claims she only brought 1. She insists there were 2. The tablet includes her dramatic statement. He took both, then offered one back to my cousin as a gift. You don't know whether to laugh or start a daytime soap opera. Historians still argue whether Sumerian scribes exaggerated certain domestic disputes or simply recorded everything because they could. You, however, are fully invested in the fig scandal and make a mental note to see if there's a sequel tablet later. Around midday, you're assigned to assist with a livestock count, a task as tedious as it is full of personality. A man with a voice like a sandstorm presents 3 goats and 1 sheep. You tally them, inspect their hooves, and record a note. Sheep is nervous, but present. Gidu glances over your shoulder and mutters, "Aren't we all?" Later, a high-ranking priest drops off a very serious-looking tablet. He says nothing, just nods and leaves. You examine it. It's a formal complaint about wheat sacks arriving with too many stones. It includes 3 measurements, a diagram of the sack's contents, and a symbol you don't recognize. Gidu frowns. That's the mark for suspected cheating. You raise an eyebrow. Not used often, he adds, but when it is, things get tense. You also come across a fascinating tablet shaped like a small pillow. It's been folded slightly at the sides to create space for multiple lines of writing. You turn it over and see a tiny mark in the corner, someone's signature seal. That, Gidu whispers reverently, was written by Lugal Namtar, one of the best scribes we've ever had. You handle it like it might whisper secrets. There's a quiet reverence here for the scribes of the past. Their receipts, their notes, even their errors. They're all part of a long clay lineage. You find one tablet with a scratched-out section and the word "oops" written in cuneiform. It's comforting. By mid-afternoon, you're handed your first real dispute case. 2 farmers, a dispute over borrowed grain, and one very smug chicken in the background. You listen patiently as they present their sides. One has a tablet, the other has a witness. You record it all, methodically, calmly, wedges neat, emotions neutral. You rule in favor of the one with the better record-keeping. It's oddly satisfying. This, you realize, is the quiet power of receipts. Not just proof, but protection. Not just trade, but trust. A well-kept tablet can prevent a fight, or at least keep it from becoming an annual shouting match involving extended family and livestock. By evening, you're back at your bench, sorting a fresh stack. One is addressed to the scribe with crooked writing, and you strongly suspect it's meant for you. It's a receipt for a donkey delivery, with the added note, "He bites, not the donkey." Another is a love poem disguised as a grain ledger. You notice how the scribe has written, "Your eyes are like dates ripening in the sun between barley tallies." Gidu catches you smiling and nods knowingly. "That's how my cousin met his wife," he says. Not all receipts are romantic. One documents a divorce settlement. She keeps the goat, he keeps the sandals. Fair. Another, more chillingly formal, records a banishment. For lying about fish weight thrice, Ninazu is exiled to the marshlands. You imagine Ninazu grumbling by a swamp, still claiming it was a clerical error. As night falls, the scribes begin stacking their tablets on racks to dry. You place yours carefully between 2 others, hoping the clay sets evenly. It's your best day's work yet. Neat, complete, maybe even a little elegant. You linger a moment, fingers still dusty, eyes soft with sleepiness. There's something beautiful about this ancient tedium, about capturing the humdrum, the petty, the practical, and preserving it for the distant future. Like now. Like you, listening in the dark. It's another warm morning in Ur, and you're already sweating by the time you step into the temple courtyard. But today, there's a different kind of excitement in the air. Someone mentions a festival. You're not sure what kind yet, but there's extra bread baking, incense wafting from doorways, and a general buzz that even the goats seem to notice. Before you can ask questions, Gidu assigns you to a new task, assisting the priest scribes with the temple's offerings register, which means, in true Sumerian fashion, you're going to spend your day tallying divine receipts. You follow a procession into a side chamber of the temple, a quiet, echoing room with high ceilings and small wall openings that let in sunlight like golden blades. At the center is a low table covered in clay tablets, bowls of fragrant herbs, animal figurines, and is that a roasted pigeon? It is. You're informed it's for the goddess Inanna. As strange as it sounds, gods in Sumer didn't just get prayers. They got goods. Lots of goods. The temple functioned as both a religious and economic powerhouse. People brought offerings to appease the gods, and the priests, ever the efficient managers, made sure it was all written down. Today, your job is to sit cross-legged next to a very serious scribe named Namu, who hasn't blinked since you arrived. Together, you record the gifts being brought. Baskets of dates, jugs of beer, small carvings, even a handful of semi-precious stones. Each item has to be noted, not just by quantity and type, but by intent. Grain from a thankful farmer, Namu murmurs, pressing her stylus into the tablet. And here, dried fish from a merchant seeking forgiveness. You raise an eyebrow. He overcharged a priest last week, she adds, like that explains everything. And in it probably does. The system is surprisingly elaborate. Each offering is assigned a category: devotion, repayment, appeasement, thanksgiving. You see one item labeled preemptive bribe, and no one even blinks. Historians still argue whether these temple offerings were deeply spiritual acts or just tax-deductible gestures wrapped in incense. The truth, you suspect, is both. You see sincerity in some eyes, obligation in others. And in one young boy carrying a bowl of dates, pure terror that he might spill something on the priest's sandals. Around mid-morning, a high priest arrives to oversee the day's most important entry, the temple ledger for festival donations. He's tall, draped in layers of embroidered linen, and walks with the kind of slow confidence that says, "I once yelled at a king for touching an oil jar the wrong way." He nods solemnly as you and Namu prepare the official receipt tablet. The items are impressive: a gold amulet, 4 flawless baskets of figs, 3 jugs of perfumed oil, and a large, mildly annoyed goose. You note each one carefully. Then comes the final step: sealing the record. The priest rolls his cylinder seal across the clay, an intricately carved image of the god Enki holding a flowing vase, surrounded by fish and reeds. The impression is perfect. You admire how the wet clay holds it, as if time itself has pressed its thumb into the moment. You're allowed to place a secondary mark beneath it, your scribe's trainee symbol. It looks like a stubby arrow and might also mean still learning. But it's there. Your first appearance on a divine record. Later, you return to the main chamber for lunch. Flatbread, onions, and a thick, sludgy beer that tastes slightly less alarming than usual. Someone offers you a sweet made from crushed dates and goat milk. It's surprisingly good, You take two and promise to write a favorable review. Back on duty, you help update older offering records. These are trickier. Some tablets are chipped, some symbols partially erased. One has a smear so perfectly placed that it changes gift of cattle into gift of cats. You and Namu have a good laugh over that one. The goddess does like company, she says. As the afternoon heat deepens, a new donation arrives. An elaborate clay statue of a fish with what appears to be wings. From a potter, the delivery boy explains. He had a dream. You dutifully write, symbolic item, meaning uncertain. It's probably fine. Then, unexpectedly, a group of musicians enters. Not to perform, but to settle a debt. Apparently, they were paid in beer for last month's procession and want to ensure the temple has their receipt on file. You find it. Barely legible, but there. One of the musicians hands you a clay whistle in appreciation. It makes a high-pitched note that scares a nearby chicken into a sprint. Your day ends with a special ritual, the burning of old offering summaries. Once a tablet is deemed unnecessary, either because it's been copied to master ledgers or because the offering has long since been consumed, it's ceremonially destroyed, not shattered, but baked, fired in a kiln to preserve it permanently, then shelved deep in the archives. You place a small tablet into the fire yourself. It hisses slightly as it dries, the wedges stiffening into permanence. You realize that even forgotten offerings are immortal here, frozen in time, waiting to be rediscovered by someone who cares. Like you. You sit quietly with Namu as the kiln glows. She offers you a sip of strong fig wine and says, "You did well. The gods will be pleased." You smile. "Even with the goose?" you ask. "Especially the goose," she replies. And under the rising moon, with your hands dusty and your heart oddly full, you feel something settle into place. You may not believe in every ritual. You may not understand every symbol. But you know how to write them. And for now, that's enough. The temple is quiet this morning. Eerily so. You arrive early, stylus tucked behind your ear like a seasoned scribe, expecting another day of mild chaos and barley disputes. But the courtyard is strangely calm. No yelling, no goats. Even the usual fish deliveries are absent. Gidu appears from a shadowed doorway with a clay tablet under one arm and a bundle of damp cloths under the other. "Today," he says, "we file." You blink. File? He leads you to a separate wing of the temple complex. The walls cooler here, thicker. Inside, the room is packed wall to wall with narrow clay shelves and niches dug into mud brick. Each slot stuffed with tablets of various sizes, hues, and degrees of crumbliness. Welcome to the Sumerian Records Room, the ancient world's most overachieving library. There's no index, no numbered drawers. Organization here is by type, author, and occasionally smell. One entire wall is labeled Accounts Market, another, Beer Quality Logs, and another still, Questions about Goats. That one's bigger than it should be. Your first task is to match tablets from yesterday's offering records with their permanent resting slots. Gidu explains. Each receipt, once fulfilled or verified, is placed with others of its kind, sorted by the temple's own ever-shifting system of logic. If it's a record of goats given to the goddess Inanna, it goes here. If its goats returned because of behavioral problems, it goes there. As you scan tablets, you notice some are tied together with thin hemp cord, clusters of 2 or 3, sometimes more. These are bundles of related receipts. Guido shows you how to tie them carefully. Not once, don't pull too tight, leave space for airflow. Yes, even receipts need to breathe. You pick up a bundle labeled Festival Beer, High Froth. It contains 4 tablets, each recording a batch's delivery, inspection, priestly approval, and notes like a bit too sour or caused singing. You shelve it in a section that smells faintly of hops and incense. Then, a surprise. Guido opens a sealed compartment at the back, something rarely shown to trainees. Inside are some of the oldest receipts in the temple's collection. Thick tablets with worn corners and almost illegible cuneiform. He hands you one carefully. This, he says, is the first record of barley wages paid to laborers for ziggurat construction. Over 300 workers, each one named, each one fed. You feel the tablet's weight, not just the physical weight, but the gravity of so many lives recorded in such tiny strokes. You run your finger over the name of a man called Puzur Lugal, barley wage, 8 liters, plus a bonus pot of beer. Historians still argue whether these early payrolls were meant to enforce fairness or simply to appease skeptical gods who demanded proof of generosity. Either way, you sense the humanity etched into each line. You return the tablet with reverence. Guido nods and says nothing, but you catch the faintest glimmer of respect in his eyes. Back to work. A group of merchant receipts needs reshelving. You find a batch from the same man. His seal is unmistakable, a stylized fish eating a coin. You shelve the receipts under Merchant Ledgers, 4th year of King Lugal Kinishe Dudu. Yes, that was a real name. Then comes a challenge. One tablet has no seal, no name, just a record. One goat, delivered, bit priest. It's unlabeled. Guido sighs. Ah, a rogue receipt. These happen occasionally. You file it under General Oddities, where it joins a tablet simply labeled, Do not trade with this man, and another reading, Fish count possibly cursed. Yay. You also discover a section labeled Mistaken Deliveries. One tablet reads, Delivered 8 reeds. Realized later they were eels. You shelve it gently and hope whoever wrote it found peace. Midday sun slants through the narrow windows. You pause to eat a meal of flatbread and mashed lentils in the shade of the storage room. There's a comforting silence here, broken only by the occasional whisper of a scribe trying to find the right shelf for unclaimed chickens, 3rd quarter. In the afternoon, a young scribe named Eni approaches, panicked. She's lost a temple wage receipt, one for a brickmaker who is very sure he delivered on time. Together, you retrace steps, check corners, ask around. Finally, you find it wedged behind a jar labeled Broken Tablets, Sentimental. You save the day, and Eni rewards you with a sweet date stuffed with something she swears is crushed fig, and not something else. You accept it anyway. Before closing time, Guido gives you one final task, crafting a summary tablet. It's a neat, formal record that outlines what's been filed that day. It includes headings like donations, labor wages, unusual deliveries, and goat incidents. None today. You write slowly, carefully. It's your handwriting now, your wedge spacing, your signature mark. And when you shelve it, you feel a strange sense of permanence. Like maybe, someday, some distant historian will squint at your work and whisper, "Ah, yes, this one understood filing systems." As the shadows lengthen and the temple doors creak shut, you roll your shoulders and dust your hands. It's been a long day among the quiet ghosts of commerce and clay. But you've learned the final lesson of bureaucracy. It only works if someone is willing to shelve things properly. And that someone today was you. The sun is already high when you're called to mediate a dispute, something the temple scribes occasionally do when the usual methods of staring blankly at a tablet don't solve the problem. You're ushered toward the edge of the city, where two farmers stand beside an extremely unimpressed ox. One of them insists he lent the ox to his cousin for 3 days. The cousin insists he returned it after 2. The ox offers no opinion, but its slow chewing and deadpan stare suggest it's heard this argument before. You take a deep breath, adjust your clay-stained tunic, and pull out your tablet. Time to be the ancient world's first receipt-based detective. Step 1. The original receipt. Farmer 1 claims to have a lending tablet somewhere. His wife is sent off to fetch it. While you wait, you examine the ox. It's sturdy, dusty, and has a slight limp. "Always had that limp," says Farmer 2. "Got it chasing a priest's dog." You raise an eyebrow and write "limp observed, origin disputed." Farmer 1's wife returns, victorious, clutching a smudged but intact receipt. It clearly states, "1 ox lent to cousin Enlil Malik, 3 days, no compensation, must return in good health." You admire the professionalism. Someone even added a note at the bottom, "Ox enjoys apples." You suspect the scribe liked the ox more than the cousins. Step 2. Return confirmation. Farmer 2 produces a different tablet. This one says, "Returned 1 ox after 2 days. Minor limp unchanged. Witness. Arab the potter." The name catches your attention. Arab is known in scribe circles for testifying in everything. There's even a joke. If a clay jar breaks in the forest and no one's around, Arab still hears it. Historians still argue whether figures like Arab were genuinely present or just used as a kind of bureaucratic placeholder. You lean toward the latter, especially since Arab also witnessed a fish trade, a bread dispute, and a goat wedding all on the same afternoon. Still, a witness is a witness. You carefully compare the handwriting, seal impressions, and date wedges. Something doesn't add up. The date on the return receipt seems to be from the same day as the lending tablet. Impossible if the ox was meant to be gone 3 days. You point this out. Farmer 2 goes pale. "Must be a miscarving," he mumbles. You nod, then gently press your stylus into the clay. "Amending discrepancy," you write. Date conflict. Pending review by temple clerk. Which is the Sumerian equivalent of, "We'll get back to you when we feel like it." The ox, meanwhile, has wandered off to eat someone's laundry. You escort both parties back to the temple and file the case under unresolved livestock agreements. It joins such classics as Whose Goat Is This? And Fish Received Did Not Match Fish Promised. The temple doesn't just store these records, it remembers them. In a society with no printing press, no spreadsheets, and no email, memory is clay. Disputes like this are logged, cross-referenced, and revisited if necessary. The city's peace depends on it. Later that afternoon, you visit the temple's outer archives to browse a series of tablets known as the Ledger of Grudges. It's unofficial, of course, not used in court decisions, but it's widely read by scribes looking for entertainment or passive-aggressive references. One tablet reads, Merchant Zuzu sold wet grain again. This is the third time. Another, Do not accept beer from Enna. Smells like sandals. You come across a much older entry. Faint wedge marks, barely readable. Returned ox was actually a different ox. Very clever. You smile. A young student asks you how you can tell such things. You explain. Look for inconsistencies in date wedges, pressure marks in the clay, stylus angle. Like any handwriting, each scribe has a rhythm, and when someone tries to fake a receipt, that rhythm breaks. The student's eyes widen. You're like a clay detective. You pause. You are, aren't you? That evening, Guido rewards you with a mug of slightly less terrible beer and a handful of roasted chickpeas. Good work, he says. Ox business is the worst. Always messier than it looks. You sit together under the awning, watching scribes dry today's tablets in the last rays of sunlight. You notice a cracked one, barely holding together. You offer to copy it tomorrow to preserve the record. Guido nods. Because that's what it's all about. Not just resolving disputes, but remembering them. Keeping the little dramas of ordinary life alive in wedge-shaped whispers. As night falls, and the ox curls up in the courtyard like a dog that's had enough litigation for one lifetime, you feel the strange satisfaction of having mediated a minor crisis with nothing but mud and logic. Not bad for a trainee. Today begins with numbers. Not gossip, not goats, just numbers. You're summoned early to the scribe house, where the door is already propped open, a trail of sandal prints leading inside. Guido waves you in with ink-smudged fingers and a familiar grunt that translates to brace yourself. You're assigned to the mathematical archive, a niche within the temple where Sumerian number nerds have been quietly obsessing over calculations for generations. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat between two stone benches, each stacked with tablets so filled with marks they practically hum with data. And this, dear listener, is where your brain begins to stretch in directions it wasn't built for. Because Sumerians didn't count like we do. They used base 60. Yes, 60, not 10. Why? Historians still argue whether it's because 60 is divisible by so many numbers, or because someone once dropped 6 10-stone weights on their foot and decided to make it sacred. Regardless, it means your new job is to learn how to count in a way that makes time-telling and degrees make more sense. But your morning routine far less so. You begin by learning the symbols. One for 1, another for 10, a combo for 60, and from there it's all about arrangement. You copy example after example into clay. 120 is 2 60s. 180 is 3 60s. 360? That's not just a number. It's a sacred circle. It's a deeply logical system, but your poor 10-fingered hands are struggling. You long for the comfort of base 10 arithmetic, until someone hands you a tablet labeled Grain Disbursement Math for Temple Bakers, and your sympathy vanishes like a sack of lentils in a rainstorm. Each baker receives of a standard grain unit if they work a full day, if they're late, and a complex fraction if they show up hungover, which apparently happens often enough to warrant a wedge symbol. You learn about sexagesimal place values, where the position of a number changes its meaning entirely. One wedge might mean 1, 60, or 3600, depending on where it sits. Context is everything. This is not beginner math. This is math that wants to watch you cry softly behind a kiln. To help, a more experienced scribe named Turi walks you through a few everyday examples. Calculating brick rations, temple rent for ox pens, even dowry tallies. You're amazed, and mildly overwhelmed, by how seamlessly they use this system. You ask about errors. Turi grins. Mistakes cost barley, he says, handing you a receipt from last year where a misplaced wedge cost the temple an entire pig. It's been immortalized in the Oink ledger, which is precisely what it sounds like. But it's not just numbers. There's elegance here. You notice how some tablets feature problem-solving exercises, word problems about planting fields, harvesting dates, or dividing oil jars among workers. It's less ancient Excel, more Sudoku with consequences. At lunch, you chew slowly through a lentil cake while studying a riddle from a math tablet. A field is 3 rods by 1 rod. If 1 rod grows 10 barley sheaves, how many feasts can be had if 1 feast uses 15 sheaves? You write down the answer, 2 feasts and 1 very disappointed guest. Later, Guido brings in an audit tablet. This, he explains, is the big leagues. A massive ledger inscribed with transactions across an entire season. Goods in, goods out, labor counted, resources tracked. Your job is to review a row and check for errors. You read slowly. 60 jugs of oil received. 52 distributed. 8 in storage. But the storage tally lists 9. You flag it with a small triangle, the symbol for please review. Guido nods in approval. Historians still debate whether these kinds of audit systems made Sumerian economies bureaucratic in the modern sense, or simply obsessively careful. Either way, you're beginning to appreciate the beauty of it. Everything had a number, a place, a count. Even the intangible gets measured. You find a rare tablet listing dream interpretations. Dream of falling, 60% chance of rainfall. You wonder who calculated that, and whether it's more reliable than modern forecasts. As the sun dips lower, you're handed a blank tablet and told to create your own set of problems. You think for a moment, then etch. A man owns 2 oxen. He lends one for 3 days and the other for 5. He is paid 2 jugs of beer per ox per day. How many jugs total? You hand it in. Guido raises an eyebrow and mutters, "Very generous oxen." He gives it a pass. Before leaving, you're shown a tablet inscribed with nothing but the number 360 over and over again. It was made by a scribe centuries ago who, it seems, just really liked circles. You walk home slowly through the temple corridors, stylus in hand, clay under your nails, brain full of numbers. A scribe's job isn't always flashy, but it's the framework. The quiet hum behind the festivals, the laws, the harvests, the drama. And tonight, as the sky shifts from gold to deep blue and the stars arrange themselves in a cosmic grid, you look up and think, maybe the universe runs on base 62. Your hands are sore this morning. The muscles between your fingers ache in that very specific way that only a clay stylus can induce. But there's no time for stretching. Gidu has summoned you with that familiar tone of urgency that usually means someone lost a tablet or something scandalous involving cheese just happened. Today, though, it's neither. It's delivery day. You're marched out of the temple compound and down to the dock where traders from neighboring towns have begun arriving with carts, baskets, boats, and the distinctive smell of travel, part wood smoke, part camel, and part something fermented that maybe wasn't supposed to ferment. Your task? Document the incoming goods and confirm each one with the official cylinder seal. This is where things get tactile. Each trader approaches a makeshift table where a clerk calls out the items. 2 baskets of dried fish. You count them, sniff them, try not to gag. 3 bolts of linen from Uruk. You run your hand along the fabric, nod appreciatively, make a note. Smooth, pale, probably not recycled underwear. Then comes the ceremony. The trader presents his seal, an intricately carved cylinder of stone or bone, and rolls it across the fresh tablet you've prepared. It's mesmerizing. The seal rolls, leaving a continuous image behind, like a tiny printing press made by someone who definitely believed in gods with big beards. One depicts a lion eating a palm tree. Another shows a man and woman exchanging goats beneath the stars. Yet another is just a spiral with dots. Modern minimalist vibes, even back then. You try one yourself. Carefully press the clay, line up the seal, and roll with just enough pressure. The resulting impression shows a winged figure holding a fish and standing next to something that might be a cow or an extremely confused horse. Gidu examines it. Acceptable, he says. Readable. Cow is ambiguous. You beam. Historians still argue whether cylinder seals were purely bureaucratic tools or status symbols, equivalent to a modern business card or a luxury watch. The answer seems obvious as you watch one merchant polish his seal with a cloth and kiss it before use. These seals weren't just for flair. They proved something had happened. A delivery was made. An agreement finalized. A goat, once very much alive, now belonged to someone else. Without the seal, the tablet was just mud. With it, it became truth. You assist in confirming seal legitimacy, matching each impression with the temple's records. There's even a sealed catalog of all known merchants, sorted by region and favored items. Ah, Gidu mutters as he flips through it. Tariq of Kish. Yes, fig specialist, aggressive negotiator, allergic to leaks. You file his delivery under perishable imports and make a note. Figs, soft but intact, minor bruising, no leak contact. Midday brings a surprise. A delivery from a distant region across the desert. The merchant presents bundles of blue stones, lapis lazuli, and spices so strong they make your eyes water just opening the bag. The temple clerk inspecting the delivery sneezes so hard he drops his stylus into the canal. You write high potency. and wonder whether this is the Sumerian version of a food allergy warning. The merchant's seal is unusual, rounder, carved with what looks like 3 turtles stacked vertically. Family crest, he says proudly, means patience and steady profits. You like it. Gidu's eyebrows suggest he does not. The afternoon passes in a blur of baskets, beans, salted meats, clay jugs of oil, and long-winded stories from traders about how dangerous the road was, how brave their camels were, and how they definitely did not shortchange the weights. Occasionally, a tablet is disputed. A weight doesn't match. A seal is smudged. One delivery claims to be 20 jugs of olive oil, but only 17 show up. The scribe before you wrote 20 with an annoyed triangle, the Sumerian equivalent of, "Are you sure though?" You help negotiate a solution. The trader will bring 3 more jugs tomorrow or accept partial barley as a penalty. You record it all. And yes, it gets a seal, an updated one, pressed beside the old. You also learn about split seals, used when 2 parties make an agreement together. Each presses half of their seal, creating a composite image that can only be verified if both sides agree. You're handed one such tablet, a grain trade between a priest and a brewer, sealed with a lion on the left and a star on the right. Together, they form a story. Apart, they're just decoration. It's beautiful, in a quiet, bureaucratic kind of way. Toward the end of the day, a young trader tries to pass off old fish as new. You notice the tablet has yesterday's date, cleverly scratched into a fresh surface. But the seal pressure is too light, the clay too stiff. You call him out gently. He pouts. Gidu finds him 1 jug of beer, payable to the scribe's lunch fund. You write the entry with great satisfaction. Evening comes, and the courtyard quiets. Deliveries slow. Seals are packed away into soft pouches, and the tablets, each still slightly damp, are laid on drying racks beneath the eaves. You walk along them, reading your own work. The tidy rows of wedge marks, the gentle spirals of official seals. You feel it suddenly. You're not just making receipts, you're capturing movement, trade, trust, time. Every seal pressed, every name scratched, every wedge carved, it's one more knot in the great net that holds this city together. And tonight, as you wash your hands in the cool canal water and the lapis sky reflects back at you, you feel sealed into the world too. The day begins with whispers. You're halfway through your morning barley porridge, when a junior scribe slides onto the bench beside you and murmurs, "There's been a situation." You freeze mid-bite. What kind of situation? He leans in. Marriage, goats, a receipt, scandal. You set your bowl down. Within the hour, you're in the temple side office, facing 3 people, a red-faced husband, a very calm wife, and a scribe who clearly regrets being dragged into this. The issue? A receipt for a dowry payment, specifically 2 goats, 1 wool tunic, and half a jug of fig wine, has gone missing. And the husband insists that it was never actually delivered. The wife begs to differ. So does her mother, who arrives shortly after, brandishing a tablet she claims is the missing record. The husband examines it, scowls, and declares it a forgery. You take the tablet gently. It's well worn but legible. It states, 2 goats, white with brown spots, both of good temperament. 1 wool tunic, new. Half jug of fig wine, opened but not diluted. Gift from Shala to husband Lugal, in presence of witness Dumuzi. You note the problem immediately. Dumuzi, supposed witness, is also the village brewer. You've seen his name on 3 different fish disputes, a broken vase claim, and one very suspicious note that read, "Lost tablet, trust me." Historians still argue whether Dumuzi was an actual person or just a scribal scapegoat created to smooth over awkward paperwork. You suspect he was both a brewer and an opportunist with a knack for plausible deniability. Your investigation begins. First, you verify the seal. The wife's tablet has a pressed mark, a horned ram standing beneath a crescent moon. You cross-reference it in the temple archive and find a match. Shala's family seal, used in barley sales and goat trades. It's valid. Next, you check the handwriting. The spacing and wedge shapes match a scribe named Enlil Tur, who you happen to know has very neat triangles and a tendency to over-punctuate. It checks out. Then, you consult the temple's delivery logs. No entry for that specific goat transfer on the date listed, but that doesn't mean much. Sometimes small transactions, especially within families, are recorded only by the private scribes involved. So you interview the goats. Well, you try. They're in the family pen outside the city wall. One is eating a sandal, the other is standing majestically atop a pile of amphorae, as if auditioning for a myth. They both have the brown spots described in the tablet. You return to the temple and file a preliminary judgment. The tablet appears authentic, the goats exist, and the seal matches. The husband grumbles but finally concedes. "Fine," he mutters, "but I never got the wine." You hesitate. The tablet does say, "opened but not diluted." You write, "possibly sampled before delivery." Intent unclear. The priest overseeing the mediation snorts. The whole affair is entered into the dispute ledger as case of the half jug and 2 possibly delivered goats. You sign the record and add your seal. As the couple leaves, marginally less tense than they arrived, you find yourself reflecting on how receipts in Sumer weren't just about stuff. They were about relationships. You recall an older case in the archive, a couple that divided a herd of sheep during a divorce, each receiving alternating animals. The record reads, "He takes sheep 1, 3, 5, she takes 2, 4, 6. The final note says, "All sheep observed, all appear indifferent." Later that day, you help copy temple marriage ledgers, rows and rows of names, seals, witness notations, and itemized dowries. There's even a standard format. So-and-so gives to so-and-so X goods under Y witness for Z intentions. Very romantic. You find a curious entry from a century ago. Bride brings 2 pots of honey, 1 flute, and an oil lamp shaped like a lion. Groom brings 1 donkey, witnessed by 3 musicians and a man named Nani, who might have been lost. The more you read, the more you realize how varied these unions were. Some formal and rich with goods, others modest, just a shared bowl of grain and an agreement sealed by hand. And yet, they were all recorded. Because what mattered wasn't what was exchanged, but that it was acknowledged. Receipts made things real. By late afternoon, you're assisting in preparing a premarital inventory. A young couple, very much in love and very much arguing over whether the groom should list his lucky fish hook as an asset. You gently recommend leaving it off. He agrees, reluctantly. The bride offers to include her mortar and pestle instead. It's seen things, she says mysteriously. You record it all, including the bonus detail. Mortar slightly chipped. Pestle speaks only truth. Guido looks over your shoulder, chuckles and says, "That's going in the legends file." Evening settles with the pink hue of sunset curling over the canal. You're on the temple steps, smoothing the edges of the last marriage receipt, carefully pressing your seal into the corner. The sound of a flute echoes faintly from somewhere. Maybe that same couple. Maybe someone trying to romance a particularly aloof donkey. You stretch your back, fingers dusty, eyes tired, but heart oddly full. Love in Sumer, you think, was complicated. Goats were involved. So was wine. And often, at least one skeptical mother-in-law. But it was all written down. Proof of care, of exchange, of intent. Whether it lasted or not, that wasn't for the receipt to decide, just to record. The sun is high and bright, baking the clay tiles under your feet as you step into the open-air market of Lagash. Today, Guido has sent you away from the temple, on purpose no less, to experience receipts in the wild. Go see how the real scribes live, he said, which you're fairly sure was both a compliment and a challenge. You pass through the city gates and into the bustle. It hits you all at once, the noise, the smells, the colors, spices, sweat, fish, figs, garlic, goats. There's a man selling dyed linen from a shade-covered stall and shouting in 5 different directions. A woman balances 3 baskets of chickpeas on her head and still finds the breath to haggle about melon prices. And every few feet, someone is scribbling. The marketplace, it turns out, is full of amateur scribes and tablet wielders. Some wear robes like yours. Others have belts loaded with tiny styluses, like dusty-fingered cowboys. Everywhere, deals are happening, and receipts are being made. You wander through the crowd until you find what you came for, the market scribes. They sit behind small portable tables, usually planks balanced on pots, with fresh clay tablets, small water jars, and stacks of previous entries drying in the sun. Their job is simple: document the day's trades so no one gets accidentally shortchanged. You watch one scribe settle a transaction between a date seller and a fishmonger. The date seller provides 6 bunches of dried dates. The fishmonger offers salted carp in exchange. The scribe records the deal, then adds, "Condition of fish, smells strong, appears intentional." You admire the honesty. You try your hand at writing one. A melon seller agrees to trade 3 large melons for 2 bolts of cloth. You record the trade carefully, ask each party to verify the description, then press a neutral temple seal, loaned to you for the day, into the clay. Historians still debate whether market scribes were officially trained or just competent locals who owned a stylus and had good handwriting. Judging by the range of styles you see, some elegant, some resembling panic, you're leaning toward the latter. You pass a scribe who is engraving in what can only be described as enthusiastic chaos. His wedges are long and jagged, and he dots everything with a swirl that you're pretty sure isn't Sumerian. Still, he seems to have regular customers. As you move deeper into the market, you come across something curious. Receipts not tied to goods, but to favors. One man brings another a meal of lentils and onion wrapped in a leaf. A tablet is quickly made. Meal provided by Namti. Recipient, Ursin. Promise of help in reed cutting next flood season. You pause. These are not trades of objects, but of future effort. The Sumerians, ever pragmatic, even recorded good deeds. Trust, once written, became contract. Next, you're drawn to a cluster of musicians. They've just finished performing in exchange for bread and wine. One of them insists on a receipt. The scribe writes, 3 songs, lute and drum. Audience, 11, including 1 sleeping child. Payment, 2 loaves, 1 jar wine, clapped twice. The performer signs with a stylus flourish you suspect he rehearsed. Just past the musicians, a traveling merchant unfurls a selection of miniature animal figurines. Cattle, birds, even a crocodile with what might be a monocle. A small crowd gathers. The merchant explains that each figurine represents a product in his home city. You pick, you point, I write the tablet. It's brilliant. Receipt as advertisement. You try it. You point at a goose. He hands you a sample tablet. Goose requested, medium size, no known biting history, he grins. Delivery next week, with seal. You don't even need a goose, but you take the receipt anyway. By midday, the sun is unforgiving. You duck under a linen canopy where an elderly woman runs a tiny cafe of sorts. Shade, cool water, and a bowl of barley stew for 2 copper tokens. She accepts clay tablets too. One man presents a tablet promising repayment in pottery shards. She eyes it, sniffs, then nods. You watch her place it in a basket of other tiny tablets tied together with rush cord. A receipts purse. Even here, on the ground, in the heat, in a space that smells like onions and ambition, people write everything down. You realize now why Sumer didn't collapse into chaos every time someone misplaced a goat. Everyone had a stylus, or knew someone who did. Back at the edge of the market, a boy is selling woven charms, little bundles of reeds and feathers meant to bring good luck. You ask if he offers receipts. He laughs, then pulls out a soft piece of clay shaped like a triangle and hands it to you. 1 charm, 1 wish, no refunds. He's going to do just fine in this world. As you walk back toward the temple gates, your satchel is heavier with the tablets you've collected. A melon deal, a goose order, a fish for date trade, and your cafe receipt, still warm from the sun. Gidu greets you with a grumble, takes the stack, and begins reviewing your work. After a long silence, he says, "You've joined the chaos." You smile. And survived. He snorts. Barely. Next time, bring me one of those lucky charms. And as night creeps across the ziggurat, and the market slowly empties, you realize something beautiful. In a world without paper, these people made permanence out of mud. Every deal, every promise, every story, rolled, sealed, and sent into the future. Like now, like here, like you, falling asleep, holding the ghost of a goose receipt. The morning begins with something very important. Breakfast. but not yours. You've been summoned to help record salaries, and in Sumerian terms, that often means food. You find yourself perched in a small shade alcove behind the temple's administrative wing, stylus at the ready, watching as sacks of grain are hauled in, counted, and assigned to various workers, not in silver, not in shells, but in literal portions of barley, beer, oil, and sometimes onions. Gidu grunts beside you, flipping through a stack of reference tablets. Today, we pay the priests. You glance up at the first in line, a high-ranking temple priest with a beard so precisely braided you suspect it has its own scribe. He approaches, muttering a prayer under his breath, and hands over a receipt tablet from the previous month. You record his new payment: 12 measures of barley, 4 of oil, 6 loaves of temple bread, and 2 measures of dark beer. The bread, by the way, smells incredible. You try not to drool on the tablet. After him comes a junior priest, then a scribe, then a temple cleaner who insists, quite firmly, that the broom he uses should count as holy equipment and therefore justify a bonus. Gidu shrugs and grants him an extra onion. You write it down. This, you learn, is ration accounting. And it's far more complex than it sounds. Each job has a standard rate. A senior priest might receive more barley but less beer. A temple singer might receive special cakes during festival months. A gatekeeper, depending on the moon cycle, gets fewer loaves but more oil for his torch. It's a delicately tuned system, a payroll dance choreographed in baked goods and legumes. Historians still argue whether these salaries were truly payments or just structured rations within a temple commune. But when you see a cook arguing that she deserves extra figs because her stews make the gods feel appreciated, you realize payment is payment. By mid-morning, you're deep into the ledgers, recording transactions as fast as the sacks come in. One man, eyes wide and nervous, presents a receipt for 4 loaves. "But I only received 3 and a corner," he says, holding out a very crumbled chunk of barley crust. You sigh. Gidu motions for the loaf equivalency tablet, which, yes, exists. It lists how to round up or down based on weight, shape, and how much has been licked. You mark the dispute as partially resolved, pending crust analysis. Bureaucracy waits for no crumb. Then comes the oddball, a priest's assistant claiming payment in singing time? Apparently, the assistant offered 6 hours of chanting during last week's incense shortage. No formal contract, no seal. But 2 witnesses nod solemnly. You draft a quick one-off receipt. 6 hours of approved hymn service. Compensation, 1 cake, sweetened, possibly nuts. Gidu raises his eyebrows. "Fancy," he says. You're proud. After lunch, finally your breakfast, you attend a special meeting. Payment audit for the divine ceremonies. These are performances meant for the gods, involving music, flowers, dancing, oil lamps, and the occasional sacrificial turnip. All the materials and labor used? Yep. Receipted. You read over the tablet from the last festival. It lists 24 flower garlands, 3 torches, 1 jug perfumed oil, 2 dancers hired from Uruk, 5 loaves for drummers, 1 chicken for unspecified ritual. The notes in the margins say, Drummer 2 never showed. Chicken highly spirited. You can't help but chuckle. In the afternoon, a guest arrives, an accountant priest from a nearby city. He wants to observe how your temple handles payroll. You show him the wage structure, the cuneiform tables, and the allocation tablets. He seems impressed. Then he frowns. You don't record emotional contributions? You pause. What? He holds up a receipt from his temple. Our scribes add spirit of work scores, helps morale. Gidu whispers to you, we did that once. It started a feud. Never again. Still, it's a good idea. In theory. Later, you help file the day's wage tablets. Each one carefully placed into its respective shelf. Singers with singers, cleaners with cleaners, goat herders. Well, goat herders get their own awkward, goat-smelling drawer. One particular tablet catches your eye. It's a bonus record for a scribe who uncovered a major overcount in the barley storage. He received a loaf, a jug of beer, and, this is real, a ribbon for his stylus. You run your fingers over the etched name. It's Lugal Kuga, the man who trained Gidu. Best scribe I ever met, Gidu says quietly. Could balance a ledger in the dark. You smile. And you copy the format exactly when you finalize today's record summary. As dusk nears, the last workers trickle in. A torchlighter thanks you for making sure his oil ration wasn't short. A temple cook hands you a honey cake. Off the record, she says, winking. You write nothing. Some things transcend receipts. You place your last tablet into the drying rack and sit back, letting the soft clay smell wash over you. Payment isn't always about numbers. It's about fairness, recognition, acknowledgement. A crumb of barley here, a jug of beer there, tiny affirmations that your labor mattered. And somewhere between loaves and oil jugs, you feel it. You're not just recording transactions. You're writing proof that someone showed up and gave their time, and that they were seen. The air is thick with heat and the distant scent of impending rain. Today, you're sent outside the safety of the temple, again, to a low-lying part of the city near the canals. It's unofficially known as the floodplain, and if your sandals make a squelching sound as you walk, well, that's just Lagash whispering its muddy secrets. Why are you here? Because floods don't wait for bureaucracy, and neither do receipts. The rain season approaches, and the temple has a long-standing policy. Record everything before the river remembers to rise. That means verifying all inventories in vulnerable storerooms, updating ration accounts, checking asset locations, and reissuing receipts for anything that looks even slightly soggy. You're joined by Nanny, a cheerful and unfortunately clumsy junior scribe who slips twice before you reach the first reed-matted threshold. It's like walking on soup, he mutters, clay tablets clutched to his chest. The storage building is dim and damp. Amphorae sit in haphazard clusters, some marked clearly with seals, others ominously unmarked. Your task: assess and document. You pick your way through bundles of dried fish, sacks of onions, crates of half-processed wool. Every item gets a note. Dry, damp, moldy, missing, or, new category you coin, probably floating soon. Nanny helps you update a grain record from 2 seasons ago. It was stored here temporarily during repairs to the upper vault. You read, 80 jars of barley, sealed, undamaged. You find 74. 1 is cracked. 3 have been repurposed by birds, judging by the feathers and a very smug pigeon glaring at you from atop the last jar. You adjust the entry. 74 intact, 1 cracked, 3 an active bird dispute. Guido will love that. Mid-morning brings your first real problem. A merchant arrives to collect a batch of copper ingots he delivered 6 weeks ago, now scheduled for temple distribution. You produce the receipt. He confirms the date. Together you wade toward the copper pile, only to find that 2 ingots are missing. The merchant glares. I delivered 20. You count again. There are 18. You both pause. You both look at Nani. I was never here, Nani says, slowly backing away into the mist. But this is where the magic of receipts saves the day. You cross-reference the intake tablet. It includes a seal, a signature, and a side note. 2 ingots borrowed for roof repairs by builder Ipkal. Ah, you flip through a supplemental ledger and find a follow-up. Ingots to be returned after festival roof completion. Estimated 2 weeks. Status not returned. You show the merchant. He reads it, squints, and finally nods. Ipkal owes me copper, he says, more satisfied than angry. You update the record. Outstanding, 2 ingots. Claim filed. See Ipkal's account. Crisis resolved. Historians still argue whether temple records were this well maintained in all cities, or whether Lagash was just run by a particularly grumpy breed of scribe. Either way, today proves the power of redundancy, and the joy of holding physical proof that you're not crazy. Later, the wind picks up, and a low rumble rolls in from the south. The canal threatens to spill over. You quicken your pace, helping the storage clerks move oil jugs to a raised shelf. You record every moved item, restamp clay seals, and make a list of items likely to float, but not likely to rot. This includes 4 empty amphorae, 1 waterproof basket, 1 very determined rat, and a small clay idol of the god Enki that keeps tipping over no matter where you put it. You take a moment to write a humorous note. Enki is clearly displeased with his shelf. Then comes the part no one enjoys. Salvaging wet tablets. Stored receipts that have gone soft from humidity are carefully lifted with reed slats and dried over low flames. Not too hot, or they'll crack. You spend the afternoon gently pressing fresh clay onto smeared inscriptions, copying what you can before it vanishes. You save 5, lose 3, and in one heartbreaking moment, realize you're holding the last copy of a fish delivery ledger from 5 years ago, now reduced to a blur of mud and wishful thinking. You close your eyes and whisper a respectful farewell. By dusk, you've redocumented nearly a dozen lost receipts, updated inventory logs, and issued flood warnings for 2 storerooms and 1 suspicious-looking melon stack. You're soaked from the knees down, your stylus is cracked, and your sandals smell like a soup no one asked for. But the records are saved. The priest overseeing the floodplain operations nods slowly as he reviews your updated list. Efficient, he says. Even included the bird theft. You grin. We may need to negotiate with the pigeons. He considers this. I'll consult a priest. On the walk back to the temple, the sky finally opens. Warm rain begins to fall, splattering the road and turning dust into slurry. You lift your robe, squish your way past a few bemused goats, And think about how even the weather, here, has to be accounted for. Inside, you place the rewritten tablets on the drying rack. You light a small oil lamp and watch the flames flicker against the damp walls. This was the day when records could have vanished. But they didn't. Because someone wrote it down. Someone took the time. Someone, muddy, tired, and probably catching a cold, made sure the story stayed told. And that someone, tonight, was you. You wake to the sound of sandals slapping urgently down the hallway and a phrase you've come to dread. Audit time. In the temple world, those two words cause a very specific kind of panic. Less fire, more sudden papyrus rustling and cursing under the breath. Today is the day when the high scribe reviews the temple's books. And by books, we mean hundreds of clay tablets, some of which, you realize with a sinking stomach, were written by you. You're summoned to the upper scribe chamber, a room with narrow slit windows and scroll shelves so full they sag like overripe melons. The high scribe stands at the center, surrounded by scribes of various ranks, all looking either smug or terrified. He's tall, soft-spoken, and radiates the kind of calm that only someone with the power to ruin your week can manage. He gestures to Gidu. We will begin with grain. Gidu gives you a look that says, stay close and don't speak unless prompted. You nod, clutching your stylus like a child holds a toy in a thunderstorm. The audit begins. The high scribe calls for tablets from the past 2 months of grain records. You and Gidu produce them, arranged chronologically, each marked with seals, delivery logs, and unit breakdowns. One by one, he reads them aloud, cross-checks them with the temple's central inventory, and notes discrepancies. It's slow, painful, precise. At tablet 16, he pauses. This entry lists 52 jars received, but only 50 distributed. Where are the remaining 2? You freeze. That's your tablet. You lean forward. Those 2 were marked for ritual use. See the small notation in the corner, held for divine offerings, with the priest's seal. He squints, then nods. Good notation. You exhale for the first time in 20 minutes. Historians still argue whether temple audits were truly about accuracy or simply a public exercise in intimidation and ceremonial pen-tapping. Watching the high scribe slowly raise an eyebrow at a smudged fish ledger, you begin to understand why this theory exists. After grain, the audit moves on to tools, spades, ropes, weaving frames, and lamp oil. You're called forward to explain a confusing entry. 6 torch handles, no torch heads. You clarify. The heads were delayed in a trade from Uruk. The shipment came in late, so the torches were split across 2 ledgers. You present both. The high scribe nods. Continue. You resist the urge to grin at Gidu, who seems faintly impressed. Then comes the sandals. There's a minor scandal involving temple footwear. Apparently, 3 pairs went missing last moon, and now a ledger shows 6 issued, 4 returned, and 1 noted as possibly eaten by dog. The high scribe doesn't smile, but you see a twitch at the corner of his mouth. He flags the entry. Dog must be verified. You make a note. Locate dog. Confirm appetite. Midday approaches, and the chamber has turned into a low murmur of clay being handled. styluses being pointed, and scribes quietly sweating. The high scribe has moved on to trade records, particularly those involving distant cities. One of the junior scribes is caught in a clear error, recording payment as 10 bolts of cloth, when the receipt clearly reads 8 bolts, 2 bundles of wool. The junior scribe flushes red. I must have copied it wrong. Silence. The high scribe slowly rewrites the correct entry, then hands it to the boy. Recopy 10 times. By dusk. Everyone exhales again. You're reminded just how serious these tablets are. They aren't just records. They're reputations. A single miscount can ripple through weeks of temple operations. A misattributed seal can break a contract or a friendship. Later, you help carry tablets from the offering chamber. One is damaged from yesterday's rain, and you assist the high scribe in reconstructing its data. He tests your knowledge. What does this mark mean? You glance. Spoiled grain, recorded with visual confirmation. He nods. And this? Estimated count. Verified by partial delivery. Witnessed by Turi. Another nod. You dare to hope you're doing well. Then, the surprise twist. A random selection audit. The high scribe reaches into a satchel and pulls out a tablet with no label. Explain this. You squint. It's one of your early works. Wedges slightly off, seal faint, but legible. It's a record of 6 loaves sent to the Eastern workers' quarters. Included 2 extra for the priest who oversees that region. Added on the spot, approved verbally. Why not record it in the ledger? You freeze. Then remember. There was no room. The original ledger had cracked. I made a temporary tablet to hold the overflow. He lifts his eyes. Where is the replacement? You pull it from your satchel. He examines both, places them side by side, and then he nods. Acceptable initiative. Gidu coughs, possibly out of pride, possibly to hide his smirk. By dusk, the audit concludes. A few errors noted, a few names embarrassed. But overall, the records hold. The high scribe packs away the final tablets, turns and says, "This temple's scribes remain sufficient," which is ancient Sumerian for excellent. As everyone disperses, Gidu claps a dusty hand on your shoulder. You survived your first audit. Barely, you say. Good. Next time, you lead it. You try not to faint. As you step outside into the cooling air, the last of the sun painting the sky bronze, you realize something. Audits are terrifying. Yes, but they're also a kind of celebration. Proof that someone noticed. That what you wrote mattered enough to be checked. That your work, your careful little wedges, shaped how a city ran. And tomorrow, you'll write again. With just a little more confidence. And possibly double-check the dog inventory. The wind is hot and restless today, tugging at tunics, scattering straw, and blowing through the temple courtyard like it's looking for gossip. You're bent over a tablet, copying barley tallies as usual, when a runner bursts through the entryway, kicking up dust and waving a broken piece of clay like it's been lit on fire. He's gasping for breath and barely manages to sputter. Missing tablets. North storehouse. Stolen, maybe. Guido looks up from his corner, sighs deeply, and says to no one in particular, "Here we go again." You're dispatched immediately. The temple official who oversees supply documentation is pacing outside the north storehouse like an angry heron. 10 delivery records, he barks. Gone. Grain and tool shipments. Just gone. You step inside, and sure enough, one shelf sits emptier than it should. 9 clay indentations where tablets used to lie. One shattered fragment on the floor. And just like that, your peaceful scribe life becomes a little political. You take stock. The remaining tablets show signs of disturbance. Slight smears, awkward stacking, a chip here and there. It's not random. Someone was looking for something. You gather what fragments you can and begin reconstructing the mystery. Tablet 1. Partial seal, just enough to identify it as a shipment to the Southern Builders Guild. Tablet 2. Completely missing. Ledger says it involved axes. Many axes. Tablet 3. Found under a shelf, sticky with what may or may not be melon juice. The implication is obvious. Someone, likely someone with sandals and a motive, wants a record to vanish. You convene with the Temple Scribe Council, which sounds more majestic than it is. It's just Gidu, Namu, and an elderly man named Leeson, who mostly yells about formatting. Theories are offered. 1. A clerical error someone wants to cover up. 2. A shipment that never actually existed. 3. A merchant with sticky fingers and an overconfident pigeon. Historians still debate how common temple record tampering really was in Sumer. Some argue that the fear of divine retribution kept most scribes honest. Others point out that when your entire economy runs on who said what and when, the temptation to fudge a wedge here or there becomes very real. You sift through other ledgers for inconsistencies. And there it is. A barley shipment from 2 weeks ago is logged in the temple outgoing ledger, but not in the storehouse's incoming records. The delivery was supposedly overseen by a merchant named Taptum, known for his dazzling smile and suspicious math. You request his merchant log. It takes time. His seal is flashy but frequently misused. Finally, you find a small travel receipt. 3 jars for northern workers. Oversaw by Taptum. The signature is smeared, and the date is the same day as a nearby festival. You write, possible overlap. Investigate whether Taptum was in 2 places at once or has a twin. Next, you search for backups. Because here's the thing. Sumerians, for all their lack of paper, understood redundancy. You check the temple's seal rolls. Long clay logs where scribes sometimes duplicated entries for security. And there it is, a faint copy of one of the missing receipts. A shipment of copper chisels and pickaxes. Destination: Construction Zone B. Quantity: 20 tools. Weight verified. You compare this to the main builder's ledger. It lists only 16 tools received. You whisper to Gidu, 4 tools unaccounted for. He sighs. Enough to build a small shrine, or tear one down. You escalate the discovery. The head priest calls for a review. Taptum is summoned. He arrives in dramatic fashion, flanked by assistants and clutching a freshly oiled beard. He insists everything is a mistake. The receipts were confusing, he says, and there were goats. You raise a stylus. Which goats? He pauses. Metaphorical goats. The meeting ends with an agreement. All future shipments under Taptum's name will require double witnessing and additional seal confirmation. You draft the protocol, press your seal in neat precision, and file it under Enhanced Oversight, Merchant Category. The missing tablets are never recovered, but the system adapts. From that day forward, Gidu requires that every tablet involving resource transfer has 2 copies, one for the temple, one for the neutral storehouse, and a summary tablet logged every 5th day. You help draft the new format, which includes a margin column titled Extra Notes and Possible Shenanigans. It becomes popular. At dusk, as you organize the day's surviving records, Namu walks past and offers you a dried fig. "You're a proper political scribe now," she says. "Just be careful. Some of us got into this job because we hated conflict." You smile, then turn back to your work. Because at the heart of it, receipts aren't just about grain and goats. They're evidence, not just of what was traded, but of what should have been. And in a world where storms, rumors, and sneaky merchants try to erase the truth, your job is to make the story stick, wedge by wedge, tablet by tablet, even when someone tries to make it disappear. It starts with smoke, not fire, not danger, just a gentle, almost polite plume curling above the rooftops at the southern edge of the city. It's followed by shouting, then running, then a flurry of goats who, judging by their pace, have decided this is a them problem. You're halfway through logging an oil shipment when someone yells, "The record's building!" You drop your stylus. The scribe's archive annex, the temple's tablet library, isn't aflame, but the building next to it is. A thatched roof pottery shed, now smoldering with righteous fury. Clay pots are cracking in the heat like popcorn, and the smoke rolls westward toward the archive like it's got something to prove. You and Gidu sprint, not something either of you is built for, toward the archive. The doors are flung open, and scribes are inside shouting instructions and hauling tablets by the armload. This is it. The nightmare scenario. You grab what you can, the recent marriage records, festival donation logs, and, because you've learned to prioritize, the increasingly chaotic goat registry. You cradle the tablets in your arms like newborns and stagger them to safety beneath the shade of a nearby fig tree. Others are doing the same. The courtyard fills with haphazard piles of tablets, all arranged with more urgency than order. Someone's dropped a bundle of ration logs. Another is arguing about whether to prioritize tax records or beer tallies. The answer, of course, is beer. Once the fire's controlled, thanks mostly to some frantic bucket work and one elderly woman who seems to have thrown soup at it, the archive stands intact, singed but not consumed. And now comes the real work. You help take inventory of what was saved, and more importantly, what wasn't. Gidu passes you a small tablet, half charred. You run your fingers across its still warm surface. "Part of the builder's records," he says, "from King Ur-Nammu's 4th year. The edges are flaked, some symbols gone. You copy what's legible onto fresh clay. 40 workers, 6 spades, 5 jars of water, 2 complaints about sandals. Historians still debate whether fireproof storage methods existed in Sumerian archives. But you now understand why so many tablets were stored in kilns, not just to dry, but to harden. A baked receipt is a permanent one. The irony is not lost on you. To save clay from fire, you must introduce it to fire. You join a group of scribes in the kilning area, where emergency baking has begun. Wet or soft tablets are placed carefully into large, dome-shaped ovens. The process is slow, delicate. Too much heat, and the clay cracks. Too little, and it stays vulnerable to rain, or rodents, or time. You watch a tablet inside blacken and firm. Its letters sharpen, stiffen. It is, somehow, becoming history. And then you're handed one to prepare. A master copy of the temple grain reserves. You press your seal, twice, and pass it forward. It vanishes into the glow. You spend the afternoon assisting in damage control. A backup record of canal maintenance schedules has been reduced to a lump. You help reconstruct it from partial versions kept by the Irrigation Guild. The names, numbers, and muddy symbols slowly re-emerge. You write, slowly, carefully. Sluice Gate 3 repaired, worker named Arfelin recovered, Arfel, wet. Another tablet records livestock assigned to priests for the upcoming harvest festival. It's damaged, but not unreadable. You re-etch. 2 goats, 1 ceremonial cow, 1 ox of questionable temperament. You wonder if it's the same ox from the earlier dispute. You sincerely hope so. Toward evening, a discovery. Buried under soot and wet reed mats, someone finds a tablet completely intact. It's from the oldest section of the archive, one of the founding ledgers. The text is formal, even poetic. This city, built of clay and time, shall remember what it counts. You feel it in your chest. Later, as the sun sinks low and the sky turns gold with streaks of ash-gray clouds, the courtyard is quiet again. The scribes sit in circles, fingers still stained, knees sore, but eyes bright with the weird, exhausted pride that comes from saving the unsavable. You walk past the stacks, some drying, some baked, some still soft with fresh wedge marks, each one a whisper from the past, a tiny scream of order in a world of mud and wind and goats. Gidu settles beside you on the temple steps. "We lost some," he says. You nod. "But we saved most." Another nod. "You know," he adds, glancing sideways, "we should probably create a fire response protocol." You reach for a tablet and begin carving. Tablet Retrieval Priority List, V1.0, 1. Central Ledgers. 2. Marriage Contracts. 3. Goat Disputes. 4. Beer Logs. 5. That weird fish count. Namu likes. He snorts. Add, "Don't throw soup unless it's a last resort." You do. And then, silence. The day's chaos fades into stillness. The flicker of kiln flames dance across the walls, casting long shadows on the temple columns. You sit among rescued records and realize, even in disaster the receipts endure. They bend, they chip, they blacken. But they remember. And because of that, so will we. By now, you've gotten used to waking up to the sounds of temple bells, bleating goats, and Gidu grumbling about someone misplacing his favorite seal again. But this morning greets you with something far stranger. A foreign merchant caravan has arrived, and with it, new math, new trade terms, and new receipts. You're summoned to the central plaza, where the high priests are receiving the traders under a canopy of dyed linen and ceremonial awkwardness. The merchants are from Elam, east of Sumer, and they've brought items you've only seen in temple drawings. Shiny stone beads, tall jars with handles shaped like birds, and cloth dyed the color of crushed beetles. It's dazzling and confusing, because the traders have their own system of record keeping. They pull out smooth clay tablets covered in symbols you don't recognize. No neat cuneiform wedges. No tidy Sumerian date clusters. Just swirling, looped signs that look like someone tried to write with a piece of cooked spaghetti. Your task? Translate, collaborate, and most importantly, figure out how to merge these receipts with yours. Gidu assigns you to work with a visiting Elamite scribe named Zanak. He's polite, soft-spoken, and carries a stylus carved from what might be bone. He offers you a gift, a tiny amulet shaped like a duck. You accept it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for senior scribes or particularly friendly goats. Together, you sit in the temple's shaded colonnade, comparing tablets. It's slow work. He explains that Elamite traders often use weight tokens in addition to receipts, little metal discs stamped with values. Their tablets are summaries, not full itemizations. Sumerian receipts, by contrast, track everything: barley counts, delivery dates, the mood of the ox who pulled the cart. Zanak reads one of your temple's sample tablets. 6 bolts of cloth, 3 jars of oil, ox scratched the fence, cart wheel cracked, delivered late, but acceptable. He blinks. Very thorough. You smile. We like context. The two of you begin drafting a hybrid receipt, one that includes key Elamite stamps but matches the temple's cuneiform ledger style. You create a column system: Sumerian units on the left, Elamite weights on the right, and a shared notes section in the center. One note reads, "Beads appear lighter than expected. Reweighed 3 times. No wind." A very important detail. Historians still argue whether such cross-cultural receipts were common or just rare, awkward attempts that scribes later pretended didn't happen. But as you and Zanak work side by side, you realize something else. Both systems are trying to do the same thing: preserve trust. Later, you're called to oversee the trade verification. This is where things get wild. The Elamites present a shipment of mineral pigment, deep blue, probably lapis-based, and the temple insists on testing it before full acceptance. A senior scribe pulls out a record of last year's counterfeit pigment scandal and narrows his eyes like a hawk spotting a lazy mouse. You assist in weighing the jars. They pass. Then, the spices. One bag smells heavenly. Another smells ambitious. You take a cautious sniff and sneeze so hard you drop your stylus. Zanak laughs and writes, in elegant swirls. Local scribe appears sensitive to cinnamon. You make a mental note to get him back later. You finalize the trade record together. 6 units pigment, weighed. 10 bundles dyed linen, counted. 2 jars spice, confirmed. 1 amulet, gift. 0 goats, despite repeated offers. Each side presses their seal. You roll yours carefully, leaving behind a familiar image. The handshake under stars. Zanuck uses a round stamp featuring what looks like two mirrored birds. The hybrid receipt is complete. That evening, you sit with Guido beneath the fig tree, showing him your work. He squints at the Elamite symbols. Looks like someone sneezed on it, he mutters. But it works, you say. And it does. The tablet is clear, structured, and, most importantly, agreed upon. It will go in the archives under a new category: foreign exchanges. You begin drafting a new reference scroll, comparative receipt forms, complete with a small duck symbol in the corner to honor Zanuck. Later, you spot him at the canal, feeding birds. He waves. You wave back, stylus still tucked behind your ear like a feather. You've made a colleague, maybe even a friend. And as the stars blink into place over Lagash, you realize something subtle but profound. The Sumerians may have invented the receipt, but the world, the messy, fascinating, goat-filled world, is still finding ways to read it. And tonight, your tablet speaks more than one language. It begins, as it often does, with a smudge. You're back in the main temple archive, reviewing older receipts for storage updates, when you find a peculiar tablet. It's small, unevenly shaped, and the top corner bears a deep thumbprint where someone pressed too hard while the clay was still wet. At first glance, it looks routine, a transaction between two barley traders. But something feels off. You read the first few lines aloud. 12 measures barley, delivered by Shulgi, verified by Enlil Kama. Then you spot it. A symbol where none should be. A wedge that leans too far. A sequence of signs that doesn't quite line up with the standard delivery format. You check the seal. It's blurred, imperfect, and oddly shallow. You call Guido over. He squints at the tablet, runs his thumb gently along the raised script, and says, "Forgery, or mistake. Maybe both." And just like that, your quiet morning becomes an accidental forensics lesson. You're tasked with finding out, is this a fake receipt? It's not unheard of. The Sumerians were, after all, people, and where people gather, so do fibs, flukes, and funny business. But to stumble upon a potentially altered receipt within temple records? That's significant. You pull reference tablets to compare handwriting, and it's clear. The wedge angles are different. The spacing between symbols is uneven. One mark is even backward. You check the name, Shulgi, not uncommon. But the seal? That's trickier. You head to the seal catalog, a long wall of imprints taken from known traders, priests, and scribes. After an hour of squinting, you find it. A crescent moon over barley stalks, Shulgi's usual mark. But on the questionable tablet, the barley stalk leans left. On every verified example, it leans right. A copycat. You write, "Seal does not match official registry. Suspected forgery. Further analysis required." Historians still argue whether such discrepancies always meant deception or could be the result of hurried work, poor clay, or even accidental mirror impressions. But this feels deliberate. You're permitted to investigate deeper. Namu joins you. Her keen eyes and memory for detail make her an ideal co-sleuth. Together, you review 2 seasons' worth of trade records. And you find more. 3, to be exact. All grain receipts, all with slightly altered seals, all bearing the name of Shulgi, but different scribes. Or so it seems. You piece together a theory. Someone is issuing grain receipts under Shulgi's name but diverting the goods elsewhere, likely for resale, possibly with the help of a lower-ranked scribe. The high priest is informed. You're summoned to present your findings, complete with matching tablets, seals, and even a recreated drawing of the altered mark. It's not just forgery. It's a quiet theft of trust. A tribunal is formed. Shulgi is called. He's older now, his hair streaked with gray, and he swears he authorized none of these trades. His real seal, he shows you, has a small crack on the crescent moon. Easy to miss, but impossible to fake. You nod. The crack isn't on the tablet. The priest thanks you, and suddenly you find yourself the star witness in a minor scandal. One of the implicated scribes confesses, quietly, quickly, with more shame than defense. The barley was going to waste, he says. Better it was sold than spoiled. The priest doesn't reply. He simply orders the records corrected, the stolen goods reimbursed, and the scribe reassigned to canal duty for 6 moons in the rainiest season. Justice, Sumerian style. Afterward, you sit in the quiet of the record hall, your thoughts echoing like your footsteps. It's not glory that settles over you. It's something softer. Gratitude, maybe. For the clay. For the truth it holds. Because here's the truth. A forged receipt is a wound. But a correct one? That's a promise. That night, under low torchlight, you begin documenting your investigation in a new type of tablet. The error log. It details known forgeries, seal irregularities, and suspicious smudging behavior. You add one final line. When in doubt, follow the wedge. You sleep well that night, not because the day was easy, but because the clay spoke. And you listened. The day is long and golden, as if the sun itself has decided to linger a little longer before slipping behind the ziggurat. It's your final day of assignment in the temple archives, at least for this season. Tomorrow, a new group of scribes arrives. Fresh hands, fresh eyes, fresh styluses, still sharp at the edges. You're told to take it easy today. No field audits, Guido says. No merchant drama, just one last tablet. And so, you return to the quiet corner of the scribe house where it all began. The bench is warm from the sun, and the breeze carries the faint scent of baked bread and clay dust. You're handed a blank tablet, damp, smooth, full of possibility. You know exactly what to write. You begin your final record, not of a trade or a debt or a goat dispute, but of yourself. It's not autobiography. It's an entry log, the kind scribes sometimes make after long service, a quiet personal document, a note to the future. It won't be stored in the master ledger room, but in the smaller chamber labeled Personal Reflections and Other Oddities. You write slowly, carefully. This tablet created in the service of the Temple of Lagash, under the season of high barley, recorded by the hand of apprentice scribe, your name, who observed the trade of goats, grain, copper, figs, beer, and a chicken who disliked priests. You pause, smile, continue. Notable events included the discovery of a forged receipt, the recovery of a tablet during flood season, and successful cooperation with an Elamite merchant who gifted a duck-shaped amulet. You glance down at your belt, where the tiny duck still hangs. In this year I learned that every wedge matters, that a smudge can undo a kingdom, that receipts are not merely marks in clay, but echoes of trust. You add a seal, not the temple's, yours. Your stylus, long worn and now smoothed from weeks of carving, rolls across the clay with just enough pressure to leave your unique mark. A curled wedge beside two dots. A little sleepy looking, but unmistakably yours. You lift the tablet, let it rest in the sun. Later, you help stack the last of the season's records. Inventory logs. Trade ledgers. Audits. Birth declarations. Marriages. Even that tablet about the ox who bit the brewer. It all matters. The archive chamber is cool and dry. You place your tablet on the shelf beside others like it. A quiet whisper among thousands. And in that moment, you understand something. You haven't just been writing receipts. You've been witnessing to a city, to its people, to its struggles and triumphs. You've been catching time as it slips through grain sacks and pigeon wings and the hands of hurried traders. You've been preserving the small, unglamorous truths that build civilizations. You walk out of the archive, stretch, and take in the sunset one last time. The city breathes around you. Carts rumble, laughter echoes, bread bakes, someone sings about fish. And now, dear listener, let's let it fade. Let's let the dust settle on the shelves, the ink dry, the stylus rest. Let the story sleep, quiet, tucked between wedges. Let your own breath slow, shoulders loosen. You are safe. You are seen. You are part of the great record now. Sleep well, little scribe. Sleep well. The clay is cool now. The temple doors are shut. The torches flicker low, and the city of Lagash slumbers beneath the stars. You picture it. The gentle rustling of reeds along the canal, the soft creak of a drying tablet shelf, the rhythmic tap of a distant stylus, still working, still recording. Somewhere, a goat settles into straw, and a breeze whispers across roof tiles, carrying with it the scent of barley and thyme. You are no longer kneeling over ledgers, no longer tallying fish or judging melon weights or chasing stolen seals. You're floating now, past the archive walls, beyond the ziggurat's shadow, carried gently on the hum of stories told and retold. The ink of the day has dried. The wedge marks have been made. The past, so carefully written, now rests peacefully in the dark, waiting for morning light in curious hands. But not yours. Not tonight. Tonight, you drift. Let the echoes of trade fade into the distance. Let the arguments over oxen blur into quiet. Let the world be soft. You have done enough. You have seen enough. You have written enough. The record will keep turning. The clay will keep catching stories. And you? You are part of it now. Still, calm, home, end of script, sweet dreams.